The prison gates creaked as they opened, and William stood still for a moment, staring at the world beyond. The shrill, grinding sound of the iron door was like a cruel reminder of the past. 5 years, gone in a blink. He had forgotten what freedom felt like. But now, here it was. It was all over, and he had no choice but to move forward. William inhaled deeply, taking in the cool, fresh air. It was different from the stale, recycled air he had lived with for so long. Even the air outside smelled new and untouched, like the beginning of something he wasn't sure he deserved. He slung his backpack over his shoulder, the weight of it pulling at his back, and started walking towards the bus stop. As he reached the stop, he saw the old bus pull up. The faded paint on its sides reflected the years it had endured. He was the only passenger. The driver didn't even look at him, lost in his own world. William climbed aboard, found a seat by the window, and leaned back, allowing his mind to drift. 5 years ago, his life had been a dream, a business, a beautiful wife, a home. He had it all. Emma, the woman he once believed was his soulmate. He remembered their first meeting at a college party, both young and full of hope. He had come from nothing, a boy from a poor family, but he had worked hard, excelled, and found his place. Emma, on the other hand, was from a wealthy family. Her father's successful business and her mother's beauty salons had given her a life of luxury. It wasn't love at first sight, but it felt like destiny. But then everything changed. A reckless moment on a rainy night shattered it all. The rain had come out of nowhere that night, thick drops slamming against the windshield, blurring the road. William was tired, having drunk more than he should. Emma was driving. It was late, and the silence between them felt heavier than usual. They had barely spoken since leaving their friend's house. Suddenly, there was a jolt, a crash. William snapped awake, his heart racing. His head spun, and his eyes shot open. Did I hit him? Emma's voice, filled with panic, broke the silence. William's mind raced. Hit who? He turned, staring at the rearview mirror, but all he saw was darkness. The road had been empty. It was a deserted stretch of highway miles from the nearest town. "Pull over, Emma! Pull over!" he shouted, his voice tight with fear. Emma, trembling, did as he asked, parking the car on the side of the road. William jumped out, his heart pounding as he ran to the back of the car. There on the road was an elderly man. William dropped to his knees beside him, feeling for a pulse. It was too late. The man was dead. William's stomach twisted with horror. How could this have happened? Why was the man even out here on this deserted road? He looked down at the old man's basket. Mushrooms scattered around. A mushroom picker. Emma ran up, panic etched on her face. "Tell me it's not true, William. Please tell me we didn't kill him." William stood there, his body frozen, the weight of what had just happened sinking in. Emma's voice trembled beside him, but all he could do was stare at the lifeless figure of the old man. He had no answers, no explanation for how it all came to this. "We need to call the police," William finally whispered, his voice hollow. But Emma hesitated, fear flashing in her eyes. "No," she said softly. "Well, say it was an accident. They'll believe us. I'm sure of it." The rain kept falling, steady and cold, as the reality of their situation set in. William felt the knot tighten in his chest, but he nodded. It was all they could do. They waited in silence for what felt like hours until the police arrived. The investigation was quick, the evidence damning. The car hadn't braked at all during the collision. The alcohol in William's blood couldn't be overlooked. Emma's father had hired a lawyer, but William knew that no defense could save him now. The evidence was clear. The court's verdict came swiftly. 5 years in a minimum security prison. As the sentence was read, William caught sight of his mother in the courtroom. The lines of age and worry had deepened on her face. She sat there, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, while Emma, his wife, his partner, was nowhere to be seen. She had sent a certificate from the hospital, claiming a miscarriage. The clang of the prison doors, shutting behind him, echoed in William's ears. The years had been long, filled with regret and isolation. The only solace was knowing that he could keep his mother in his thoughts, But even that was ripped from him when he learned of her death. She had died of a heart attack, the news reaching him too late, too far into his sentence. He had never been able to say goodbye. Prison had shaped him in ways he hadn't expected. He had to endure the silence, the endless hours of nothingness. He had lost Emma's love, her support, and even her memory. The letters had stopped coming, the visits had ended. For 5 years, he had been forgotten by everyone he thought cared. Now, standing on the bus to freedom, William realized he had nothing left. No family, no friends. He was a man lost in the world, his past nothing but a series of broken promises and shattered dreams. His thoughts drifted to Emma, the woman he once loved, the woman who had left him to rot in prison without a second thought. The bus jolted as it pulled into the station, and William stepped off, unsure of where to go. His steps led him aimlessly through the streets, past the empty places that once held memories, past the cold apartment he had once called home. There was no place left for him. He found himself at the old apartment he had bought for his mother. It was locked. His key didn't fit. The apartment was no longer his. Panic rose in his chest, but he forced himself to calm down. It was just another loss, just another betrayal. As he stood there, unsure of what to do next, a neighbor from the building recognized him. "William, you're back," Laura said, a warm smile breaking through her confusion. "Your mother's apartment. It's not yours anymore. Emma had sold it," Laura explained, leaving William's heart cold. She had taken everything from him, even his mother's legacy. Laura, seeing his distress, offered him a place to stay temporarily in the building's janitor's room. William accepted without hesitation. He had nowhere else to go. The room was small, windowless, dark. It was the lowest of lows for a man who once had it all. But here he was, just a man with nothing. Days turned into weeks. William spent his time trying to figure out what he could do next, but everything seemed out of reach. His dream of rebuilding his life seemed like a distant memory, buried under the weight of his mistakes and the betrayal of those he had trusted. Then one day, he received a call. The voice on the other end was familiar. It was Michael, his old friend from the village. Michael had become the chairman of the village council, a position of power that William never expected him to hold. "I heard you were back in town," Michael said. "I want to help you. There's a position here. It's not much, but it's something. A new start." William didn't hesitate. He knew he had to take whatever he could get. But there was one catch. He had to return to the village, to face the ghosts of his past. The village looked the same as it had when William left, and yet everything felt foreign. The houses were still there, the familiar faces of old neighbors, the trees he had once climbed as a child, all of it was still present. But to William, it felt like a world he no longer belonged to. He met with Michael, who guided him to the village council building. The new position was as a gamekeeper, someone who protected the village's forests and wildlife. It wasn't much, but it was honest work, something William could do to rebuild his dignity. "I'm offering you this because I believe you deserve a second chance," Michael said. But William wasn't so sure. A second chance felt impossible. William accepted the position and moved into a small cabin in the forest, miles from the village. The isolation, however, felt more comforting than it should. The silence of the woods was all he needed to think, to plan, and to put the past behind him. Yet it was hard to forget, especially when his thoughts kept drifting back to the people who had wronged him. Emma, his ex-wife, and her family. They were the ones who had caused all this misery, and yet they had moved on while he remained stuck, a prisoner to his past mistakes. Life as a gamekeeper was quieter than William expected. He spent his days maintaining the forests, ensuring poachers didn't harm the wildlife, and keeping the area safe. But one autumn morning, everything changed. A group of poachers appeared, armed and reckless. They were cutting down trees and hunting deer illegally. William had no choice but to confront them. The confrontation escalated quickly. He disarmed one of them and restrained another. The third man fled into the woods. The police arrived, and soon William's actions were the talk of the village. For the first time in years, people started respecting him again. The victory felt hollow, though. William had done the right thing, but the damage had already been done. His past, his mistakes, were like an invisible chain around his neck. No matter how many good deeds he did, no matter how many poachers he stopped, he couldn't escape the legacy of his past. One evening, as he sat by the fire in his cabin, he received an unexpected visitor. Rebecca, the doctor who had helped him with the abandoned child. She had been to the village before, but this time she brought news. "William, I've been thinking," Rebecca said, her voice hesitant. "You've done a lot for others, and I know you're trying to rebuild your life. But you don't have to do it alone. I want to help." William looked at her, his heart heavy. He had grown fond of her, but he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. He was still haunted by the past, by Emma and everything that had gone wrong. Rebecca smiled, a warm, genuine smile. "I don't need you to fix everything," she said. "But you don't have to live in isolation anymore. You have people who care about you." William was taken aback by Rebecca's words. He had spent so much time shutting people out, convinced that no one could truly understand his pain. But here was Rebecca offering him something he hadn't had in years. Companionship, support, a chance at something new. As the days passed, he found himself thinking more about her offer. She had always been kind to him, never judging, always understanding. But could he trust himself to open up to her? To build something after everything he had lost? One evening, after a long day of work in the forest, William walked back to his cabin. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. He had been working harder than ever, trying to keep himself busy, to avoid thinking too much about his future. But as he reached the cabin, he saw a figure waiting on the porch. It was Rebecca. She had come to visit him again. "Are you going to invite me in?" she asked, her tone light. But there was a depth to her voice that made William pause. They sat together on the porch, the evening air cool as they shared a quiet moment. William couldn't remember the last time he had felt this at ease. "I've been thinking," Rebecca said softly, breaking the silence. "Maybe you're right. Maybe starting over doesn't mean completely forgetting the past. It means finding a way to move forward with it." William nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could face it. The weeks that followed were filled with small moments of change. William began to open up to Rebecca more, sharing pieces of his past, his pain, his regrets. And little by little, she helped him see that maybe he didn't have to carry that burden forever. But old wounds don't heal quickly. Even as William began to build a life for himself, the shadow of Emma's betrayal lingered. It haunted him in quiet moments, in the stillness of the forest, in the solitude of his cabin. One day, as he was working in the village, William saw a familiar face. It was Michael, his old friend, now a prominent figure in the village. Michael's expression was serious, but there was a glimmer of something: concern, or perhaps guilt. "William," Michael said, "I need to talk to you. It's about Emma." William's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't heard her name in months, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face it. But Michael's tone left him no choice. Michael led William to a quiet corner of the village, away from prying eyes. His words were heavy, the weight of the past hanging in the air between them. "Emma, she's not doing well," Michael said, his voice tinged with a hint of remorse. "After everything that happened, she's lost everything. Her father's business collapsed. She's struggling." William felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, guilt, confusion. The woman who had once been his world was now just a shadow of the person he had known. "Why are you telling me this?" William asked, his voice strained. Michael hesitated before responding. "Because you deserve to know. I think Emma realizes the mess she created, but she's too proud to admit it. She's not coming back, William. Not to you anyway. But I think she's trying to find a way to make it right. Maybe it's too late, but she wants to talk to you." The words hit William like a wave, knocking the breath out of him. For so long, he had imagined confronting Emma, confronting the betrayal, but now that the opportunity was here, he wasn't sure what to do with it. "I don't know if I can forgive her," William muttered, his mind racing. "How could I? She's the one who ruined everything. She left me to rot in prison while she went on with her life. And then she destroyed my mother's legacy. She sold everything, everything I worked for." Michael's eyes softened. "You don't have to forgive her. You don't owe her anything. But maybe, just maybe, you owe yourself the chance to let go, to stop carrying the anger, the bitterness." William looked at Michael, a part of him torn between wanting to confront the past and knowing that moving forward was the only way to heal. The next day, William found himself at the old cafe where he had once met Emma. His heart pounded as he walked inside, the familiar smells and sounds almost overwhelming. Emma was there. She hadn't changed much, but there was a hollowness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. When she saw him, her face softened. "William," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I didn't think you'd come." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The years of silence, the betrayal, all of it weighed heavily in the air. Finally, William broke the silence. "Why, Emma? Why did you do it?" His voice cracked. But there was no turning back now. Emma looked down, her fingers trembling as she twisted her coffee cup. "I was scared. I thought I could fix everything by pushing you away. I thought I could make it all go away by pretending it didn't matter. But it did. It always did." William listened, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He wanted to yell, to make her feel the pain she had caused. But instead, he just sat there, listening to the woman who had once been everything to him, now reduced to an apology. "I don't know what to say, William," she whispered, tears forming in her eyes. "I ruined everything." William sat in silence, his heart torn. He had always loved Emma, even after everything that had happened. But now, as he looked at her, he realized that love was gone. She wasn't the person he had once known, and neither was he. The man who had walked into that courtroom 5 years ago, filled with hope and naivety, was no longer here. "I can't change the past," Emma said softly. "I can't fix it. But I can tell you that I've learned the hardest lesson of my life, and it's too late. I know it is." William's gaze softened, but the bitterness in his heart remained. "I don't need your apology. I need peace." He stood up, walking away from her, leaving behind the woman who had once been everything to him. He didn't need her approval or forgiveness. The past was behind him, and he was finally free. William didn't look back as he left the cafe. The air outside was crisp, the weight on his shoulders slightly lighter than before. He wasn't sure where his life would take him next, but for the first time in years, he felt like he had a choice. He had found redemption not in Emma's apology, but in the life he was building on his own. In the quiet of the forest, in the work he had done as a gamekeeper, in the love and peace he had finally found with Rebecca and their family. As he walked back to the cabin, the sun began to set, casting a golden light on the forest. And for the first time, William smiled. "I'm going to be okay," he whispered to himself. "I'm going to be okay." If you found William's journey of redemption and peace inspiring, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience and second chances.